Greetings everyone, I'm Dilys Williams. I'm the Director at Centre for Sustainable Fashion and Professor of Fashion Design for Sustainability at University of the Arts London. The long-standing collaboration between Centre for Sustainable Fashion and Sustainable Angle started pretty much when we first started the centre back in 2008. I remember really well meeting Nina just as she was completing her Masters, and she posed really stretching, curious, important questions to us as we were setting out. And looking now back at all the work that Nina, Amanda and the rest of the team, who I know well, many of whom have come through the Masters programme at London College of Fashion, I can really see the opportunities for designers, whether students, whether working as sole traders, or whether part of global design teams, have the opportunity to really expand what it means to be a designer. Back in 2008, the materials basket for fashion was very restricted. We still have a huge amount of work to do, but with the thousands of materials that are now on offer and that people can see at this expo, we have an opportunity to really change the status quo in fashion. My long-standing personal and professional relationship with Sustainable Angle started with us looking together at the criteria of what it could mean to make better decisions as designers. And the world recognition of their work is by no accident. The rigorous research, the insatiable curiosity, and really actually the aesthetic of the offer of the expo is really unparalleled. It's the work of head, heart and hands, and I know that these guys, along with ourselves, have just such commitment to making change in the fashion system. There is still a huge amount to do, but this really does change the game for fashion designers like nothing has done before. I'm so sorry not to be with you at the expo. As you can see, I'm in another part of the world, but I look forward to coming back and finding out just how the designers who have been at the expo are really able to make demonstrable change. Thank you to Nina, Amanda and the rest of the team for your insatiable appetite to make change, for the curious, critical work that you do. I'm very proud to be a collaborator and a personal and professional friend.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 10th Future Fabrics Expo. This is a really good moment to be here, a great joy and gratitude that we are able to stage this 10th edition of the Future Fabrics Expo. Finally. So you have just heard Dilys Williams, Professor Dilys Williams from the Centre for Sustainable Fashion, introducing us and what we do. So thank you to Dilys for these opening remarks and support over the years since 2010. But most importantly, I thank Dilys for introduction to Amanda Johnston. We have done 10 Future Fabrics Expos together, and that is a huge joy to work together. Of course, at this stage, a huge thank you to the team who is across the expo in both rooms. So they're also over there. So thank you to the team. It's an incredible effort putting this together, especially after COVID. So hugely excited that this has worked out. And I think we have achieved much together. The expo speaks for itself. Please go and look around. There is so much to see, so many thousands of textiles to source from, sustainably and responsibly produced. We have more than ever solutions here for you with a diversified fiber basket, which is very much the motivation behind all of this. We've got more exhibitors than ever. We have got more solutions than ever, more innovations than ever. We've got more partners than ever, such as thanking now Parley for the Oceans, LVMH. We have the Loudest Foundation for the first time. We've got Mills Fabrica, Plastic Planet. We've got a lot of new partners. Please go and see them in the curated area of solutions. And yet, after all this sort of shoulder clapping and making ourselves feel good with the Future Fabrics Expo, having said all that, it's sad to say that we are nowhere where we should be in terms of the environmental impact. So all industry sectors, particularly fashion and textiles, must cut greenhouse gas emissions by at least half by 2030, as probably most of you in the room know. That is 8 years from now, which is basically tomorrow. A pressing target that the UN's IPCC says we have the tools to achieve. And indeed, the tools are all around you. You see them at the Future Fabrics Expo. You see them presented by our fabulous speakers later on in the seminar series. And of course, what that means, these targets, is that for fashion, we have to have more ambitious goals, including reducing CO2 emissions, protecting the oceans, restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, fair and living wages, and higher animal welfare. And all these issues, challenges, opportunities will be discussed today and tomorrow here in the seminar series of the Future Fabrics Expo. So now, hand over to Amanda Johnston, curator and educational consultant at the Sustainable Angle, and introducing also our next speakers.
Thank you, Nina. And I just really want to second what Nina was saying about the urgency of our mission. She said we've been working away like crazy for 10 years. And this is by far the largest Future Fabrics Expo we have ever staged, for those of you that have been following us for a while. So also draw your attention to, as Nina was saying, we've worked doubly, quadruply hard to bring to you also the knowledge and education that will hopefully leverage this change that we need to do most urgently. And again, I would also like to thank the team, world-beating team of women that work like crazy all hours to bring together the scope of the expo that you see before you. And in a little while, we are going to be joined by Cyril Gutsch. And Cyril said to us a couple of years ago, I think when we first shook hands with him, we're going to grow this thing massively. And we have done. And we will continue to do so to really push and leverage that change that is much needed in pushing education, knowledge, communication, and the solutions that Nina was referencing. So I'm not going to waffle on too much more. I'm absolutely delighted to bring to the stage Nicole Rycroft, who is the founder and director of Canopy Planet. So they're an environmental, not-for-profit, driving positive change in the fashion industry forcefully, and we're delighted to be working with them. So thank you, Nicole, and take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's really delightful to be here, to be part of celebrating the 10th Future Fabrics Expo. This is such an inherently hopeful event, I think, optimistic, in fact. And brava to Nina and the Sustainable Angle team, who probably can't hear me because they don't have their headsets on. But really, event organizing at the best of times, even without global pandemics, is not for the faint of heart. And so to really be able to be pulling this off at this scale is really quite remarkable. So I'm delighted to be here with you to explore how we employ the art of the possible to build 21st century supply chains. And what better place to be doing that right here, surrounded by all of these 21st century materials and solutions that are ready to scale. And with you, a room full of creatives, talented people who bring dreams to reality every day. So today's climate and biodiversity crises are attributable to many things. Deforestation, habitat loss, fossil fuel use, the list goes on and on. But really, there are two overarching drivers that sit at the top of that list. Unsustainable consumption and a dearth of imagination. Both of these have been at the foundation of climate inaction, and both are within our powers in this room to reset. So Canopy's work with the fashion industry started 8 years ago when one of my team was researching the opportunity to protect large swaths of Canada's boreal forest and woodland caribou habitat, because at that time there was the transition to digital, and so paper consumption was falling, and so to the relief of caribou and the climate, there was thought that these paper mills might actually be shuttered. Mills that were logging and drawing on ancient carbon-rich boreal forests to make pulp for newspaper and other paper products. But what we discovered was that there was actually a different trend at hand, and that many of these mills were slated for conversion to become dissolving pulp mills for man-made cellulosic textiles. And so when we looked at other key forest landscapes around the world, we discovered that there was a similar thing happening, and that 200 million trees disappear into viscose, rayon, lyocell, and other man-made cellulosic fabrics every year, and that it's slated to double within the decade. And that it was at that time, and with that impetus, that we launched Canopy Style, which is focused on ensuring that viscose production does not lead to the destruction of the world's ancient and endangered forests and the loss of species that we share 97% of our DNA with, like the orangutan. Now, when we started Canopy Style, a lot of brands, a lot of designers were unaware that viscose textiles were originating from forest ecosystems, let alone high carbon and biodiverse forest ecosystems. And it's not an intuitive link that trees that stand tall in a forest actually become that soft, silky fabric next to your skin. But viscose is just another supply chain with hidden costs that don't show up on the price tags that we see. The price tag associated with extractive linear production systems. And over the past 8 years, we've built collaborative relationships amongst and with many of the largest fashion conglomerates, as well as the greenest brands, all focused on making both fashion as well as frontline community rights fashionable. So we're now at a point in the Canopy Style initiative 8 years on where we have gone from 0 to 487. We now have 487 brands who are formally committed to the Canopy Style initiative. They have all committed to stop sourcing from ancient and endangered forests, to help kickstart commercial scale production of next generation solutions, and to work together and with us to conserve the world's remarkable forest landscapes. As you can see, it's brands that range from luxury to malls, with Stella McCartney, LVMH, Kering, H&M, Zara, Walmart, and many, many others in between, all leaning in, sending a very clear signal that this is the direction that they're wanting to head, with timelines after which they have zero tolerance for sourcing any viscose fabrics that contain ancient and endangered forest fiber, and many brands have already made this switch. And because of brands sending such a concerted and clear message through the supply chain, the viscose supply chain has responded in kind. Now, initially, of course, there was resistance from some of the producers, but to their credit, many of the viscose producers have also stepped in. They've developed similar commitments and have shifted their supply away from sourcing from high carbon, high biodiversity value forests, recognizing that they don't need to log these critical, most vital forest ecosystems to make t-shirts and blouses and suit linings. And so as a result of brands consistently engaging with their suppliers, 50% of global viscose production is now verified with a green shirt or at low risk of originating from these critical high carbon, high biodiversity forest landscapes. 50%. So 50% is green, which means, of course, that 50% is still red or orange, and so it's still a work in progress. And if you're a brand, you can definitely find out who's racing to the top and who's clinging on to the bottom through Canopy's Hot Button ranking, which is produced every year, which helps brands be able to discern and avoid risk in their man-made cellulosic supply chains. But even though it's clear that there's still work to be done, I think there's good reason to pause and actually note that half of this massive global supply chain has fundamentally transformed their practices over the course of the last 5 years. That's exactly the pace and scale of change that we need to be seeing, not only within the man-made cellulosic supply chain, but also within cotton, the fossil fuel sector, plastics, leather, and many, many others. But I think it shows what's possible when there's powerful collective action that's really geared towards concrete outcomes and ambitious targets. But surprisingly, not surprisingly perhaps, not sourcing from the world's most critical forest ecosystems is not exactly the highest bar to be clearing. So that's the bottom bar that we're clearing. And the art of the possible really calls us to aim higher, to be protecting the world's planetary systems. And to meet the 2030 targets, then we need to get a lot more creative. We need to reduce, of course, our reliance on virgin forest fiber as well as other raw materials by at least 50% by 2030. Now that sounds like an audacious and perhaps even crazy goal to be targeting, but that is exactly what the science tells us we need to achieve. And I think we have a track record of change that shows that it is actually possible when we move and imagine the perhaps seemingly impossible. So, fashion's contribution to this for forests will be really around reducing consumption by 50% of next-gen sources and shifting to next-gen sources for man-made cellulosics and for packaging. So, if we imagine what it means to use 50% less, even if it's just by kind of like the development of the new business models that are already taking place, you know, the business models to capture more value from clothing that staying in use longer, the repair centers, secondhand, the rentals, the encouraging customers to use their clothing for just 1 year more. Imagine what would happen if everything was used for just twice as long as the current make, wear, waste model that we've invented. We'd have half as many trees logged. We'd be using half as much cotton. We'd be using half as much water and sending half as much waste to landfill. Now, these models are obviously in development, but the fact that they're in development would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. If we also imagine that the 50% and the half that still need to be manufactured are now actually made from next-gen materials, waste materials that are already in circulation, byproducts of either the textile production chain or other production chains, the food sector, the agricultural industry. These next-gen solutions are fundamentally lower carbon and footprinted, 50% of the ecological footprint of linear extractive supply chain industries. So recycling and regenerating materials holds incredible promise, be it waste textiles, agricultural residues left over after the food grain harvest, or microbial cellulosics. Next-gen solutions are truly the future of fashion, and we are surrounded by thousands of examples of those solutions in these halls today. And although it was considered impossible 5 years ago by man-made cellulosic producers to use waste textiles or other alternative sources to trees to make good quality commercial volumes of cellulose, of viscose, we now have 5 of the top 10 viscose producers on market with man-made cellulosics that are made with 30% recycled content. The world's first next-gen pulp mill, dissolving pulp mill, it's a textile-to-textile pulp mill, will open in just 3 months in Sweden. And so really what we're seeing, and this dress here is made also with next-gen material, is gracing the cover of some of the world's top fashion magazines. We're seeing that next-gen solutions aren't something of science fiction. They're here today. They are chic and circular, and they are proving that solutions are sexy and available to all of us. And so some of Canopy's brand partners are starting to really double down and set ambitious targets for between now and 2030, decoupling financial vibrancy from raw material use. H&M is already public with their commitment to be using 50% less raw materials by 2030. There are others that are also in the process of developing those commitments. If anybody is here with a brand and wants to join that Next Gen Champions Club, feel free to grab me after this. And this scale and level of ambition is exactly kind of what we need to see. Next-gen solutions like the thousands that are here will be a really core element and important part of brands being able to make that transition. Of course, in our haste for solutions, we need to beware of false solutions. We won't achieve our planetary targets if we just shunt the problem around the table, moving from cotton to forest fiber or from plastics to paper. That's called burden shifting. But as we roar into this second year of this turnaround decade, we're at a point where we must pivot from embracing the fact that we have challenges to really moving forward with a level of ambition that is commensurate and proportional to the existential challenges that we're facing. We need to be willing to take the leap. This is Canopy Style's initial group of leaders working group members. It's members from Stella McCartney and Eileen Fisher, Zara and H&M. And you can see that they're all literally taking the leap, the figurative as well as the literal leap with us at the very start of Canopy Style. And I think what this really shows is that within Canopy Style, not only did they land on their feet, but their efforts and the collective action of many brands that will be in these halls over the next couple of days, as well as outside, is that with Canopy Style, we've been able to show that you can change, you can transform linear extractive supply chains within years, not decades. And with COVID, we've seen you can actually transform supply chains overnight if you actually have enough will and willingness to lean in and do it. And so now is the time for us to move from making incremental change to us actually really setting a bold course of action. Set bold goals that seem perhaps impossible today, but within the next 5 to 10 years will absolutely be reality. Renewcell will not be the only next-gen dissolving pulp mill for very long. There will be many others within the next 5 years. Make sure that budgets are being set to support the development of next-generation solutions and innovation. Put in place offtake agreements. Make sure that your teams are prioritizing the innovators as well as the conventional producers who are taking the risk with first-to-market product. And if you're in a position as an investor, not only at a venture capital level, but make sure you're investing in vehicles that actually have the potential to scale these solutions that we all so desperately need. A friend actually showed me this image, which I think kind of encapsulates the moment in time that we're at. This is New York, as you can see, in 1900, and the circle is around the car that is on the street. It's the only car on the street in Fifth Avenue, and the rest are horse and buggies. And if we fast forward 13 years, the circle is around the only horse and cart left on Fifth Avenue at that time, and the rest are cars. Most people in the first photograph would have been incapable of imagining that 10 years later, 13 years later, if we're going to be exact, that is the scene that they would have been taking in. But a few people imagined that that was possible. And that's why it happened. The massive retooling of industries, for better and for worse, the positive and the negative associated with that, was because of that imagination. And so this is a room that possesses and holds that imagination. This is a room of creatives, of cultural creatives, of design creatives, systems creatives. This is a community with the potential to really shift the dial. You take risks, creative risks, every day, every season, and we possess both the imaginations as well as the purchasing influence as well as the investment potential to make this seemingly impossible, the art of the possible, a reality. So let's take that leap together and apply ourselves to protecting the irreplaceable. Thank you.